very warm welcome, gentle listener, to this quiet space we have carved out, a space for reflection and repose. I am your guide on a journey back through the corridors of time, a storyteller who finds the most profound narratives not in the clamor of battles or the decrees of emperors, but in the silent, enduring language of stone, mortar, and design. Tonight, we turn our gaze to one of the most remarkable chapters in the grand story of human creation, a tale of ambition and ingenuity that shaped the very ground beneath our modern world. We are here to explore Rome's forgotten megastructures, the architectural secrets that built an empire. Together, we will walk through cities of concrete and marble, where arches soared, aqueducts defied gravity, and domes touched the sky. This is the architectural story of Rome, an empire built on ingenuity, pragmatism, and a relentless drive to conquer both land and the limitations of building itself. Their structures weren't just buildings. They were declarations of power and permanence, whispered in a language of engineering that still echoes today. So, allow the world outside to fade. Let the rhythm of my voice be a gentle current, carrying you into the heart of an ancient civilization, where the story of our world was written in structures of breathtaking scale and enduring beauty. Foundations of empire, from Etruscan roots to Republican innovations. Imagine, if you will, the Italian peninsula long before the rise of the Caesars. The landscape is a patchwork of hills and fertile plains, dotted with the settlements of various peoples. The air is filled with the scent of pine and wild herbs, and the sounds are those of nature and early industry. The chipping of stone, the lowing of cattle, the murmur of languages that have long since fallen silent. It is in this cradle of cultures that the seeds of Roman architectural genius were first sown, not in a flash of sudden invention, but through the patient absorption and adaptation of older, established traditions. Before Rome was a republic, let alone an empire, it was a kingdom, and its people were neighbors to a sophisticated and enigmatic civilization, the Etruscans. The Etruscans, who flourished in the region of modern-day Tuscany, were masters of metalwork, pottery, and, crucially for our story, certain architectural principles that the early Romans observed with keen interest. While much of their building was done with wood and terracotta materials that are far less permanent than stone, they bequeathed to their Latin neighbors a foundational architectural element that would become a Roman signature, the true arch. The Etruscans understood how to arrange wedge-shaped stones, called voussoirs, in a semicircle, creating an opening that could bear immense weight and span greater distances than a simple post and lintel system of a flat beam laid across two columns. You can almost feel the cool, damp earth in the subterranean tombs of Etruscan cities, like Tarquinia, where these early arches formed sturdy, reassuring gateways into the afterlife. They also used them in city gates and drainage systems, practical applications that appealed deeply to the nascent Roman character. The Romans, ever the pragmatists, saw in this curved structure not just a clever trick, but a principle of immense potential. They saw a way to build bigger, stronger, and more efficiently. Etruscan influence also shaped early Roman religious architecture. The classic Etruscan temple was a distinct structure, different from the elegant marble temples of the Greeks that we so often picture. It typically stood on a high podium, or base, accessible only from a single grand staircase at the front. This created a powerful sense of axiality, drawing the worshippers' focus directly forward, toward the sacred inner chamber. The temple itself was often squarish, with a deep porch supported by widely spaced columns. and its roof was frequently adorned with vibrant terracotta statues and ornaments. When the Romans began to build their own temples, such as the great temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, they adopted this Etruscan model. They built upon a high podium, they emphasized the frontal approach, and they used terracotta for decoration. While they would later borrow heavily from the Greek architectural orders, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, this early Etruscan framework, with its emphasis on a clear, powerful orientation, remained a core component of Roman sacred design. It was a design that spoke of authority and a direct relationship with the divine, a message that resonated with a people who believed their city was destined for greatness. As Rome transitioned from a kingdom to a republic around 509 BCE, its architectural ambitions began to grow in lockstep with its political and military power. The early republic was a period of constant struggle and expansion. As Roman legions conquered neighboring territories, the city of Rome itself began to transform. It needed new public buildings, more robust infrastructure, and defensive walls to protect its growing population. This was a time of practical innovation, of learning by doing. The early Romans were not yet building with the gleaming marble that would characterize the later empire. They were working with local material stuff, a volcanic stone that was relatively easy to quarry, and travertine, a harder limestone. It was during this Republican period that the Romans truly mastered the arch, moving it from the subterranean and the utilitarian into the monumental. They began to build bridges of stone that arched gracefully over rivers, structures so robust that some, like the Pons Fabricius in Rome, still stand and serve their original purpose today. They used the arch to construct vast sewer systems, most famously the Cloaca Maxima, which drained the marshy lowlands of the Roman Forum and made the area habitable. This was not glamorous architecture, but it was essential. It was the work of engineers who understood that a great city must rest on a solid, functional foundation. From the arch, it was a logical, yet brilliant, leap to the vault. By extending an arch in a straight line, they created the barrel vault, a simple, strong, tunnel-like roof. Imagine the cool, echoing space beneath one of these early vaults, perhaps in a warehouse or a covered walkway. The air is still, and the light filters in from the ends, creating a sense of enclosure and security. This form was perfect for covering rectangular spaces, providing a fireproof and durable alternative to wooden roofs. But the true stroke of genius came when they intersected two barrel vaults at a right angle. This created the groin vault, a structure that concentrated the weight of the roof onto four corner piers. This was a revolutionary development. It opened up interior spaces in a way never before possible, allowing for larger rooms with more light and air, as the walls between the piers were no longer needed for primary support. These vaults, born of Republican ingenuity, would become the building blocks for the vast basilicas, bathhouses, and palaces of the empire. However, the most significant innovation of the Roman Republic, the one that would truly set the stage for the architectural marvels to come, was the gradual development of concrete. Roman concrete, or opus caementicium, was not an overnight discovery, but an evolution. Early forms were little more than a rough mortar used to bind irregular stones together in a technique called opus incertum. But the Romans were tireless experimenters. They began to realize that by mixing a binder-lime mortar with an aggregate of broken stones, gravel, and sand, and then adding water, they could create a material of extraordinary strength and versatility. The true breakthrough came when they discovered a special kind of volcanic sand, which we now call pozzolana, found in the region around the Bay of Naples. When this pozzolanic ash was mixed into the mortar, it reacted chemically with the lime and water to create a substance that was incredibly strong, waterproof, and would even set and harden underwater. This was a game changer. Suddenly, the Romans possessed a building material that was far cheaper and required less skilled labor than carving massive stone blocks. It could be made on site, and most importantly, it could be molded. While it was still in its wet plastic state, concrete could be poured into wooden formwork of almost any shape imaginable: arches, vaults, and soon even colossal domes. The Romans would often face their concrete cores with more aesthetically pleasing materials like brick or cut stone, but the immense, load-bearing heart of the structure was this remarkable artificial stone. This was the secret weapon of Roman construction, the material that gave them the freedom to think on a scale that no civilization had ever dared to attempt before. As the Republic drew to a close, battered by civil wars and the ambitions of powerful men, the architectural foundations for empire were firmly in place. The Romans had inherited the arch from the Etruscans and perfected it. They had developed the vault to open up vast interior spaces, and they had unlocked the transformative potential of concrete. They had built roads that were beginning to stitch their territories together, and aqueducts that were starting to bring the lifeblood of fresh water into their cities. The stage was set. The building blocks were all there, waiting for the dawn of a new era, an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity that would provide the resources and the imperial ambition to use these tools to create some of the most enduring wonders the world has ever known. The practical, earthbound innovations of the Republic had paved the way for the celestial domes and soaring structures of the Empire, a legacy built not just on conquest, but on the quiet, revolutionary power of pozzolana, the arch, and the vault. Concrete revolution, the secrets behind Rome's enduring wonders. We now turn from the foundations of the Republic to the very substance of the Empire, a material so transformative, so potent, that it can only be described as a revolution frozen in time. This is the story of opus caementicium, Roman concrete, the humble yet miraculous mortar that gave form to the grandest imperial ambitions. It is the unseen hero dwelling at the heart of Rome's most iconic structures, a testament to a profound understanding of chemistry and engineering that would not be rivaled for more than 1,000 years. While the previous era had laid the groundwork with arches and vaults, it was the perfection of concrete that allowed Roman architects to break free from the rigid geometry of cut stone and dream in curves, in soaring domes, and on a scale that was, until then, the stuff of pure fantasy. The secret, as we touched upon, lay not in the concrete itself. Rudimentary forms of mortar had been used for centuries, but in a single magical ingredient. Along the sun-drenched shores of the Bay of Naples, in the shadow of the great volcano Vesuvius, the Romans discovered a unique volcanic ash. They named it pozzolana, after the nearby port of Puteoli, from which it was shipped across the empire. This fine, reddish-gray powder was the key. When mixed with lime, broken stone aggregate, and water, it did something extraordinary. A chemical reaction began, generating heat as the pozzolana and lime fused, forming interlocking crystals that bound the entire mixture into a single monolithic mass. This was no mere mortar, simply drying in the air. This was a new substance being born, a man-made stone of immense compressive strength. More remarkably, this hydraulic concrete could set and harden, even in the total absence of air, including underwater, allowing the Romans to construct massive piers for bridges and solid foundations for harbors with an ease that would have been unthinkable to their predecessors. Let us linger for a moment on the process itself, for it was a marvel of organization and labor. Picture a vast construction site in the heart of Rome. The air is thick with fine dust, carrying the sharp, clean scent of slaking lime and the earthy smell of damp soil. A complex web of wooden scaffolding and formwork rises against the sky, outlining the shape of the wall or vault to be. This formwork was the mold into which the architectural vision would be poured. Into these wooden frames, teams of laborers would deposit the concrete mixture, not as a single liquid pour like we might imagine today, but in successive layers. They would lay down a course of the thick, mortar-like concrete, and then press into it an aggregate of broken stones and rubble known as caementa. Layer upon layer they would build, tamping it all down to eliminate air pockets and ensure a dense, solid core. Crucially, this rough, powerful core was rarely left exposed to the elements. The Romans developed sophisticated facing techniques to protect it and to give it a refined, regular appearance. In the late Republic, they favored opus reticulatum, a distinctive diamond pattern of small, pyramid-shaped stones of tuff pressed into the setting concrete. Later, during the height of the empire, the preferred method became opus testicium, a facing of kiln-fired bricks. When we look at the ruins of the Colosseum or the great bath complexes today, what we often see is this brick skin. But we must remember that this is merely the veneer. The true strength, the immense structural integrity, comes from the solid mass of opus caementicium hidden within. This composite method of construction was brutally efficient. It meant that the bulk of the structure could be built by relatively unskilled labor, with only the bricklaying on the exterior requiring the hand of a more practiced mason. It was a system perfectly suited to an empire with a vast workforce and an insatiable appetite for building. This material liberation led to an architectural explosion. Freed from the tyranny of the straight line and the right angle, Roman architects began to explore the fluid, dynamic possibilities of the curve. They could now create vast, uninterrupted interior spaces, shaping them with a sculptor's sensibility. And nowhere is this revolution more breathtakingly realized than in the temple to all gods, the Pantheon. To stand within its walls is to stand inside the mind of a Roman architectural genius. From the outside, it presents a conventional Greek-style porch with towering Corinthian columns. But this classical entrance is a deliberate act of architectural misdirection, for it gives no hint of the spatial revelation that lies beyond the great bronze doors. You step inside, and the world changes. You are no longer in a rectangular space, but a perfect cylinder, its walls curving gently around you. And above, floating as if by some divine power, is a colossal, coffered dome, a perfect hemisphere stretching 142 feet across. At its apex, a single unglazed opening, the oculus, allows a solid shaft of daylight to pierce the gloom, moving slowly across the interior surfaces like a celestial clock, connecting the earthly realm with the heavens. The entire structure, the massive 20-foot-thick walls and the dome itself, is a masterpiece of concrete engineering. The architects understood precisely how to manipulate their material. The aggregate in the concrete mixture becomes progressively lighter as the dome rises, from heavy basalt in the foundations, to brick and tuff in the walls, and finally to light, porous pumice stone at the very crown of the dome. The iconic square coffers, or recessed panels that adorn the dome's interior are not merely decorative. They are structural voids, removing immense weight without compromising the dome's integrity. Hidden from view, embedded within the cylindrical walls, are massive relieving arches and vaults that channel the immense downward and outward thrust of the dome safely into the foundations. The Pantheon is the ultimate expression of concrete's potential. A single, unified, monolithic structure, perfectly balanced, enclosing a volume of space that feels both immeasurably vast and deeply intimate. It is a building that does not just contain space, but celebrates it. But the concrete revolution extended far beyond this singular masterpiece. Consider the markets of Trajan, a sprawling, multi-level complex often called the world's first shopping mall. Here, concrete allowed Roman engineers to carve a 6-story commercial center directly into the side of the Quirinal Hill. A series of barrel-vaulted storefronts, or tabernae, line curved corridors, while a great market hall is covered by a soaring growing vault, bathing the space below in natural light from a series of clerestory windows. This was architecture for the people, a bustling hub of commerce made possible by concrete's ability to tame a difficult landscape and create complex, tiered structures. Or think of the great basilicas, like the Basilica of Maxentius and Constantine in the Roman Forum, the last of the great imperial basilicas. Its ruins still dominate the landscape. Here, the architects used the growing vault system, perfected with concrete on a titanic scale. 3 enormous growing vaults formed the central nave, creating a vast, open hall that dwarfed any traditional post and lintel structure. The sheer volume of uninterrupted interior space was staggering, designed to inspire awe and project the emperor's power. It was this architectural model, with its spacious nave and high windows, that would later be adapted by early Christians for their first great churches. The concrete revolution, then, was the silent engine of Rome's architectural supremacy. It was a technology that allowed for unprecedented scale, speed, and formal freedom. It enabled the Romans to build bigger, stronger, and faster than any civilization before them. This remarkable material, born of volcanic ash and Roman ingenuity, formed the very core of their amphitheaters, their palaces, their warehouses, and their temples. It was the substance that gave shape to their power and permanence. And as we shall see, this same versatile, powerful material was the key to creating the vast networks of infrastructure that carried water, goods, and armies across the known world, binding the sprawling empire together. Infrastructure of power, aqueducts, roads, and bridges. Let us now drift away from the heart of the city, from the magnificent domes and bustling markets, and turn our attention to the arteries and veins of the Roman world. For an empire is more than just its capital. It is a living, breathing organism, and its life depends on a constant, reliable flow. A flow of water, of soldiers, of goods, and of information. This is the story of the infrastructure of power, the vast and intricate network of aqueducts, roads, and bridges that bound the Roman Empire together. These were not mere conveniences. They were the very architecture of unity and control, monumental undertakings that conquered landscapes, defied the forces of nature, and ensured that the pulse of Rome was felt in its most distant provinces. They were a declaration, written across mountains and valleys, that no corner of the empire was truly remote, and that all things ultimately flowed towards and from Rome. We begin with the most vital element of life itself, water. As Rome's population swelled into the hundreds of thousands, The Tiber River and local wells could no longer satisfy the city's immense thirst. This was a thirst not just for drinking, but for the very essence of Roman urban life, for the grand imperial baths, the countless public fountains, and the flushing of the great sewers. The Roman answer to this challenge was the aqueduct, perhaps the most elegant and visually stunning of all their engineering feats. The principle was one of beautiful simplicity, gravity. The genius of the Roman aqueduct lies not in pumping water under high pressure, but in meticulously maintaining a shallow, consistent downward gradient over dozens of miles. It was a delicate, unending slope, a controlled, gentle fall that coaxed water from pristine springs high in the hills and guided it on a long, patient journey to the city. Imagine the surveyors, the mensers, standing in the remote countryside, their brows furrowed in concentration. They were the unsung heroes of this process, armed with simple yet precise instruments. They used the chorobates, a long wooden plank with a water level carved into its top, to establish a perfect horizontal plane, and the groma, a cross staff with plumb lines, to lay out perfect right angles. With these tools, they would plot the aqueduct's course, a path that had to navigate the contours of the land with unerring accuracy. A gradient too steep, and the water would rush, eroding the channel. A gradient too shallow, and the flow would stagnate. The ideal slope was a minor miracle of calculation, often dropping only a few feet for every mile of distance. For most of its journey, the aqueduct was hidden from view. We so often picture the iconic soaring arches, but these were the exception, not the rule. The vast majority of an aqueduct's length was a simple, covered channel, the spicus, laid in a trench just below the ground, or, where necessary, tunneled directly through hillsides. This subterranean path protected the water from contamination and kept it cool and fresh. The channel itself was a masterpiece of waterproofing, typically lined with a special cement called opus signinum, a mixture of lime, pozzolana, and crushed terracotta tiles. This pinkish, impermeable lining ensured that not a drop of the precious cargo was lost along the way. You can almost feel the deep, resonant silence within these stone-lined tunnels, the only sound being the constant, soothing whisper of moving water, a hidden river flowing steadily toward its destination. It was only when the carefully plotted course encountered a valley or a deep depression that the aqueduct was forced to reveal itself in all its glory. Here, the Roman engineers, using their mastery of the arch and their revolutionary concrete, would build the magnificent bridges that have become enduring symbols of Roman civilization. Tier upon tier of arches would rise from the valley floor, built with a core of solid opus caementicium and often faced with precisely cut stone blocks. Each arch was a perfect expression of structural efficiency, channeling the immense weight of the stonework and the water above down into the massive piers below. Think of the Pont du Gard in southern France, a jewel of the NCM's aqueduct. It strides across the Garden River on 3 tiers of arches, the highest rising over 160 feet. The stone is a warm, golden limestone that seems to capture the light of the Provencal sun. To stand beneath, it is to be humbled by its scale and its grace. It is both a brute force solution to a geographical problem and a work of sublime artistry. And all of this colossal expenditure of labor and material, was to support a small stone-lined channel at its very top, carrying a stream of water no more than a few feet deep. It is a profound statement about the value the Romans placed on the civic health and well-being that this water provided. The aqueducts were the lifelines of the cities, terminating in great distribution tanks from which water was piped to fountains, baths, and the homes of the wealthy. Its constant flow, a symbol of Rome's ability to provide for its citizens and attain the natural world for their benefit. If the aqueducts were the empire's circulatory system, then the roads were its skeleton, providing the rigid framework upon which its power was built. The famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," was a literal truth. They were conceived primarily for military purposes, designed to allow legions to march swiftly and efficiently from one end of the empire to the other, suppressing revolts and defending the frontiers. But they quickly became the essential conduits for everything else. For the rumbling ox carts of merchants carrying grain and wine, for the swift horses of the cursus publicus, the imperial postal service, and for the administrators who governed the sprawling provinces. A Roman road was not a simple track. It was a sophisticated piece of engineering built to last for centuries. Their construction was a layered, methodical process. First, a wide, shallow trench would be excavated. At the bottom, a foundation of large, flat stones, the statumen, was laid to provide stability. Above this came a thick layer of rudis, a dense concrete mixture of smaller stones and gravel. The next layer, the nucleus, was a finer concrete of sand and cement, which was tamped down and leveled to create a smooth, hard base. Finally, this was topped with the summa crusta, the wearing surface typically made of large, polygonal flagstones of basalt or another hard local stone, fitted together with the precision of a mosaic. The finished road was crowned, meaning it was slightly higher in the middle than at the edges, allowing rainwater to drain off into the ditches that ran alongside it. Imagine traveling along such a road. The surface beneath your feet, or beneath the wheels of your cart, is solid, reliable, and seemingly endless. It cuts a determinedly straight line across the landscape, deviating only for the most severe obstacles. Every Romang mile is marked by a cylindrical milestone, a milarium, telling you the distance to the next major city and reminding you of the emperor who sponsored the road's construction or repair. The rhythmic sound of marching feet, the clatter of hooves, the groan of wooden axles, these were the sounds of the empire in motion. This network, eventually comprising over 50,000 miles of paved highway, was the architecture of connection, transforming a vast and diverse collection of conquered lands into a single, integrated political and economic zone. Of course, a road is only as good as its weakest link, and the greatest obstacles to their straight, relentless paths were rivers. Here again, Roman engineering rose to the challenge with the construction of stone arch bridges, monuments of permanence and strength. The principles were the same as those used for the aqueducts, but the structures were often even more robust to withstand the lateral force of floodwaters and the heavy traffic of the roads they carried. Construction would begin by creating a dry workspace in the riverbed, often using a cofferdam, a temporary watertight enclosure. Within this space, they would drive wooden piles deep into the riverbed and pour their hydraulic concrete to create massive, immovable foundations for the piers. Upon these piers, a temporary wooden framework, known as centering, would be erected in the shape of the arch. The wedge-shaped stones, the voussoirs, would then be laid upon this framework until the final central keystone locked the entire structure into place, making it self-supporting. The centering could then be removed and floated downstream to be used for the next arch. Many of these bridges still stand, a testament to the quality of their design and construction. The Pons Fabricius in Rome, built in 62 BCE, still connects an island in the Tiber to the riverbank. The magnificent Alcantara Bridge in Spain, spanning the Tagus River, bears an inscription from its builder, declaring that the bridge will last for all time. It was a bold claim, but one that has, for 2 millennia, proven to be true. These bridges were powerful symbols. They were a physical manifestation of Rome's ability to overcome natural barriers, to literally bridge divides, and to impose a rational, man-made order upon the landscape. Together, this integrated system of aqueducts, roads, and bridges formed the essential framework of the Roman Empire. They were the architecture of sustenance, carrying life-giving water to the cities. They were the architecture of control, moving armies and administrators with unparalleled speed. And they were the architecture of unity, fostering the trade and communication that transformed a patchwork of territories into a cohesive whole. This vast, empire-wide project, built with the strength of concrete and the elegant logic of the arch, ensured that the great urban centers, the hearts of Roman life and culture, could not only exist but flourish on a scale never before witnessed. It was this network that fed the spectacles, the forums, and the public life that would come to define the Roman world. Cities of spectacle, the Colosseum, forums, and public life. Having traced the flow of water and commerce along the empire's arteries, we now arrive at its heart, the Roman city itself. Here, within the bustling urban centers, the full power of Roman architecture was unleashed not merely for function, but for feeling. The structures we will now explore were the grand stages for Roman life, designed with breathtaking ingenuity to entertain, to govern, and to shape the very soul of the citizenry. This was the architecture of public experience, where concrete, arch, and vault were employed to manage crowds, inspire awe, and cultivate a shared Roman identity. From the thunderous roar of the amphitheater to the quiet dignity of the law courts and the steamy relaxation of the public baths, these buildings were the physical embodiment of the Roman social contract, monuments of spectacle and community that defined what it meant to live in the greatest empire on earth. At the epicenter of this world of spectacle stands the most famous Roman building of all, the Flavian Amphitheater, known to us as the Colosseum. Its very existence is a statement of political genius. It was built by the Emperor Vespasian and his sons, the Flavian dynasty, on the site of the extravagant private lake of the despised Emperor Nero. With this single act, they symbolically drained away the memory of tyranny and returned the land to the people of Rome, a colossal gift of entertainment and civic pride. It was the ultimate expression of bread and circuses, the imperial policy of keeping the urban populace content with free food and spectacular, often brutal, entertainment. The games held within the gladiatorial combats, the wild animal hunts, the mock naval battles were more than mere diversion. They were a ritualized display of Roman power over man and nature, a violent drama that reinforced the martial values of the empire. As an architectural achievement, the Colosseum is a masterclass in efficiency and design. Imagine its immense elliptical form rising from the valley floor, a structure of travertine stone and brick-faced concrete that could hold an estimated 50,000 to 80,000 spectators. The exterior is a perfect lesson in classical composition. 3 stories of open arcades encircle the building, each level framed by engaged columns of a different architectural order, ascending in sophistication from the sturdy, simple Tuscan on the ground floor to the scrolled Ionic on the second and the ornate Corinthian on the third. This progression, known as a superposition of orders, created a sense of visual harmony and lightness, preventing the massive facade from feeling overwhelmingly heavy. Above the arches, a tall attic story, adorned with Corinthian pilasters, was fitted with sockets for the 240 wooden masts that supported the velarium, a massive retractable awning that could be unfurled by a specially trained team of sailors to provide shade for the crowd below. Yet, the true genius of the Colosseum was its interior logic, its profound understanding of crowd control. The tiered seating, the cavea, was a perfect reflection of Rome's rigid social hierarchy, with the emperor and senators enjoying the best seats near the arena floor, and the common poor relegated to the highest wooden bleachers. Access to these seats was through a system of 80 ground floor arches, known as vomitoria. These led into a complex network of barrel-vaulted corridors and stairways that allowed the immense crowds to find their seats or exit the building within minutes, a feat of logistical planning that modern stadium designers still admire. And beneath the wooden, sand-covered arena floor lay another world entirely, the hypogeum. This was a 2-story subterranean labyrinth of tunnels, holding pens for animals and quarters for gladiators. A complex system of elevators and trapdoors allowed for dramatic entrances, with wild beasts or armed combatants suddenly appearing as if from nowhere in the center of the arena. The Colosseum was not just a building. It was a perfectly calibrated machine for delivering spectacle. If the Colosseum was the theater of public entertainment, the Roman Forum was the stage of public life itself. Located in the valley that the great Cloaca Maxima had drained centuries before, the Forum was the original heart of the Republic, its political, judicial, commercial, and religious center. Unlike the Colosseum, it was not a single planned structure, but an open, rectangular plaza that had grown organically over time, surrounded by a dense and sometimes chaotic collection of buildings. To walk through the Forum was to walk through the history of Rome. Here, orators addressed the crowds from the rostra, the speaker's platform decorated with the prows of captured enemy ships. Here, the sacred flame of the city was tended by the Vestal Virgins in their circular temple. The dominant architectural form within the Forum was the basilica. These were not churches, but immense and versatile public halls that served as law courts and centers for business transactions. Buildings like the Basilica Julia and the Basilica Aemilia were long rectangular structures, their vast interior spaces made possible by rows of columns that divided the hall into a wide central nave and flanking aisles. Light streamed in from clerestory windows high above, illuminating a space filled with the constant hum of civic life, the arguments of lawyers, the negotiations of merchants, the chatter of citizens meeting to exchange news. The architecture was pragmatic and spacious, designed to facilitate the orderly processes of law and commerce that were the bedrock of Roman society. As the empire grew, emperors began to build their own, more grandiose fora adjacent to the original, each a more planned and symmetrical monument to their own power and generosity. The most magnificent of these was the Forum of Trajan, a vast complex designed by the architect Apollodorus of Damascus, which included a triumphal arch, a great public square, 2 libraries, and the colossal Basilica Olpia, its scale and opulence dwarfing everything that had come before. Beyond the realms of spectacle and governance, Roman architecture also catered to the realm of personal well-being and social connection, and nowhere more so than in the great imperial baths or thermae. These were not simply places to wash. They were sprawling, state-funded leisure complexes, often set in beautiful park-like grounds. For a very small entrance fee, Any Roman citizen, rich or poor, could enter a world of unparalleled luxury. The baths of Caracalla, for instance, could accommodate over 1,600 bathers at a time and covered more than 33 acres. They were palaces for the people, designed to foster a sense of shared community and to display the emperor's munificent care for his subjects. The architectural layout of the baths was a marvel of symmetrical planning and sophisticated engineering. The bather would typically follow a set sequence through a series of rooms of different temperatures, moving from a cold plunge in the frigidarium to a warm room called the tepidarium, and finally to the hot, steamy calidarium. These central bathing halls were architectural wonders in their own right, with soaring groin-vaulted and domed ceilings that created immense, light-filled interior spaces. The true magic, however, was hidden below the floor. A vast network of furnaces, the prefernium, burned tons of wood to heat the water and the air. This hot air was then channeled through an ingenious central heating system known as the hypocaust. The floors of the bathhouses were raised up on short pillars of brick, creating a hollow space through which the hot air could circulate, warming the marble floors from beneath. Hot air also rose through flues embedded in the walls, enveloping the rooms in a blanket of radiant heat. The sheer scale and complexity were astounding. The interiors were lavishly decorated with imported colored marbles, intricate floor mosaics, and hundreds of statues displayed in niches. Surrounding the main bathing block were libraries, lecture halls, gymnasiums, and even food vendors. The thermae were the social hubs of the Roman city, places where business was conducted, friendships were made, and the body and mind were refreshed, all within an architectural envelope of breathtaking scale and opulence. These cities of spectacle, with their amphitheaters, forums, and baths, were the beating heart of the Roman world. They were a testament to an architecture that could not only house vast numbers of people, but could actively shape their collective experience. Through the masterful use of concrete and the vault, Roman engineers created interior volumes of unprecedented scale, and through meticulous planning, they managed the flow of crowds with an efficiency that remains impressive. These structures were a constant physical reminder to every citizen of the power, the wealth, and the organizational genius of the empire. They were the tangible proof of Rome's greatness, a legacy of public architecture whose forms and functions would be studied, copied, and adapted for millennia, leaving an indelible mark on the very idea of what a city could be. Imperial echoes, Rome's architectural legacy across civilizations. Our journey through the world of Roman megastructures is now drawing to its gentle close. We have walked the foundations of the Republic, marveled at the revolution of concrete, followed the lifelines of water and stone across the land, and stood in the heart of cities built for spectacle. But the story of Roman architecture does not end with the fall of the Western Empire in the 5th century. It does not lie buried and forgotten beneath the dust of ages. Instead, like a powerful river reaching the sea, it flowed out, dispersing its essential elements into the cultures that followed, becoming the source from which new and magnificent architectural traditions would draw their strength and inspiration. This final chapter is the story of the echoes, the enduring legacy of the arch, the vault, and the dome, as they were remembered, adapted, and reborn across civilizations, proving that the architectural secrets of Rome were too profound to ever truly be forgotten. When the political structure of the Western Roman Empire crumbled, its architectural knowledge did not simply vanish. It fractured, surviving in two distinct ways. In the East, the empire itself did not fall. It endured for another 1,000 years, centered on its magnificent new capital, Constantinople. This was the Byzantine Empire, and it became the direct and brilliant inheritor of Roman engineering. Here, Roman traditions were not so much copied as they were transformed, infused with a new spirit of Christian mysticism and Oriental splendor. The architects of Byzantium took the robust, earthbound forms of Rome and sought to make them float, to dematerialize stone and create interiors that seemed to shimmer with divine light. The supreme achievement of this transformation is the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, built by the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. It is the culmination of a structural puzzle that had fascinated Roman builders. How to place a perfectly circular dome over a vast square room. The Romans in the Pantheon had placed their dome on a massive circular drum, a powerful but direct solution. The Byzantine architects, however, devised a solution of breathtaking elegance, the pendentive. Imagine 4 great arches rising on 4 massive piers, forming a square. The pendentives are the curved, triangular segments of a sphere that spring from the tops of these piers, mediating the transition from the square base to the circular rim of the dome above. The effect is magical. The dome does not seem to rest heavily on the walls, but to float ethereally, suspended from heaven by a golden chain. As one ancient writer described it, the interior of Hagia Sophia, with its vast, light-filled central space, its glittering gold mosaics, and its seemingly weightless canopy, is a spiritual evolution of the Roman basilica and the Pantheon, a space designed not for the gathering of citizens, but for the congregation of the faithful in the presence of an immanent God. The Roman vault and dome were reborn, not as expressions of imperial power, but as metaphors for the heavens. Meanwhile, in the fragmented lands of the former Western Empire, the legacy survived in a more rugged, earthbound form. This was the era we call the Romanesque, a name that literally means in the Roman manner. Throughout the early Middle Ages, from the 9th to the 12th centuries, builders in Italy, France, Germany, and Spain sought to recapture the lost grandeur of Rome. The knowledge was imperfect, the resources scarcer, but the memory of Roman permanence was a powerful inspiration. The great abbey churches and cathedrals of this period are characterized by a return to the foundational elements of Roman building. They are massive, fortress-like structures of stone, with thick walls and small windows, conveying a sense of immense stability in a violent and uncertain world. Look closely at a Romanesque church, and you will see the Roman arch everywhere in the doorways, the windows, and most importantly, in the ceilings. The barrel vault, that simple, extended arch first perfected by the Romans for utilitarian structures, was now used to roof the long naves of these great churches. The air inside is cool and deeply resonant. The heavy stone vaults create a profound sense of enclosure and solemnity, a space for quiet contemplation. They also adopted the groin vault, allowing for the construction of aisles and the introduction of more light. The Romanesque style was a conscious, if sometimes clumsy, attempt to reclaim a lost heritage. It was Roman architecture remembered, a testament to the enduring power of its fundamental forms, the arch and the vault, to create spaces of strength and spiritual gravity. As the influence of Europe expanded, a new and powerful civilization was rising in the south and east. The Islamic world, which spread with incredible speed from the 7th century onwards, absorbed vast territories that had once been part of the Roman and Byzantine empires, from Syria to Spain. Here, the Roman echo took on yet another new voice. Early Islamic architects encountered, and were deeply impressed by the Roman ruins and Byzantine buildings in the lands they now ruled. They did not simply imitate them. They synthesized them with their own artistic traditions to create a new and vibrant architectural language. They adopted the arch, but often transformed it into the graceful and distinctive horseshoe arch, which you can see in all its glory in the great Mosque of Cordoba in Spain. To walk through its forest of columns, many of them recycled from earlier Roman and Visigothic buildings, is to be in a space that is both reminiscent of a Roman basilica and yet utterly unique. They mastered the dome, using it to crown their mosques and tombs, often covering it in stunningly intricate geometric tilework. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, one of the earliest masterpieces of Islamic architecture, is a centrally planned octagonal building, a design with clear precedents in Roman mausolea and Christian martyria, yet its decoration and purpose are uniquely Islamic. The Roman legacy provided a structural toolbox: columns, arches, domes that Islamic builders used to create spaces of dazzling mathematical complexity and decorative beauty. For centuries, the architectural knowledge of Rome was thus filtered, adapted, and reinterpreted. But then, in the 15th century, in the city-states of Italy, something extraordinary happened. The echo suddenly became a clear, articulate voice once more. This was the Renaissance, the great rebirth of classical antiquity. Architects were no longer content to merely borrow Roman forms. They sought to understand the very principles, the philosophy, and the mathematical proportions that had guided the original Roman masters. They journeyed to Rome to measure the ruins, to crawl through the Pantheon and the Colosseum, and to read the newly rediscovered treatise De Architectura by the ancient Roman writer Vitruvius. The Florentine architect Filippo Brunelleschi, tasked with building a dome for his city's cathedral, studied the construction of the Pantheon in minute detail to unlock its structural secrets and engineer his own, even larger dome. Leon Battista Alberti wrote his own architectural treatise, consciously modeling it on Vitruvius, codifying the principles of classical design for a new generation. The Roman triumphal arch was reborn as the grand entrance to Renaissance churches. The symmetrical, orderly plans of Roman villas became the blueprint for the palaces of wealthy merchants and popes. The classical orders Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian were revived with scholarly precision and used to bring harmony, logic, and a humanistic scale to buildings. The Renaissance was a deliberate and profound reconnection with the Roman past, a belief that the architectural language of the ancients was the most perfect ever devised for creating buildings that were both beautiful and rational. This intentional revival cemented Rome's architectural legacy as the very foundation of the entire Western architectural tradition. From the Renaissance onwards, the influence of Rome never faded. It flowed into the grand theatricality of the Baroque and was later refined into the elegant neoclassicism of the 18th and 19th centuries, which gave us the great museums, libraries, and government buildings of Europe and America. Structures that used the language of Roman temples and basilicas to speak of democracy and enlightenment. Even today, the echo is with us. The concrete that allows for the fluid shapes of modern architecture is a direct descendant of opus caementicium. The logistical genius of the Colosseum's crowd control informs the design of every modern sports stadium. The arch, the vault, and the dome remain fundamental components of our building vocabulary. And so, our journey ends. From the early lessons learned from the Etruscans, through the revolutionary discovery of concrete, to the construction of an empire-wide infrastructure of power and cities of breathtaking spectacle. The architectural story of Rome is one of relentless innovation and enduring influence. The structures they built were not just declarations of power for their own time. They were seeds of ideas, planted so deeply in the soil of our collective history that they continue to grow and blossom around us. The secrets of their forgotten megastructures were, in the end, too powerful to remain secret, their echoes shaping the very world we inhabit, a quiet, constant, and calming reminder of the enduring power of a well-placed stone.